Well, joining me now is Sky News Washington correspondent Annelise Nielsen. Annelise, thank you so much for coming on the U.S. Report tonight. And I got to say, it's a little hard to remember, but Joe Biden is still the president. And, you know, given everything that's going on in the world, including a serious escalation in tensions with Russia, this worries me because have a look at this.
As a gift to the press, will you please talk to us? Mr. President, President Biden! Please, we haven't heard from you all trip! Mr. President!
Now, at least he made it up the stairs there, but pollster Nate Silver has suggested that maybe Biden should step down and hand the reins over to Kamala Harris for the rest of the term. But that hardly seems like a good idea either. Annelise Nielsen, how are things looking for Joe Biden between now and Inauguration Day? And by extension, how are things looking for the world?
Well, look, there's one side of this, which is the fact that he's fastidiously avoided media. And this has been consistent throughout Biden's presidency. This isn't new. And this is why there's so many questions about how his cognitive fitness has been over the last 4 years and how much was hidden from the American people and the rest of the world. So when we're watching this trip where he was at APEC and the G20 in South America, there were no interactions with the US press and the president. They were kept, there's stories about them being ushered off to the side at events and forced to watch on a screen before being allowed to get near him at the last moment. We saw just those brief clips of him wandering off. And the questions remain about whether he is still fit to be in that position. The focus has gone off. Everyone's talking about Donald Trump coming in. Donald Trump is assuming some international policy roles. I mean, even the interactions he's having around suggesting what he wants to do with Israel and Ukraine. This is what the world is watching. But in the meantime, you're absolutely right. Joe Biden is the president until January 20. So Nate Silver said, why doesn't he just step aside and let Kamala Harris take over for the last stretch? It would help them achieve what they wanted, to have the first female president of the United States be a Democrat. She might be seen as a tougher person to deal with. We're quite vulnerable, really, in a world sense, that any adversary watching America would know that this is the time to try something if they wanted to. Not only have you got Donald Trump coming in on January 20 in this period before then, but don't forget we had the Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin not even tell Joe Biden that he had cancer last year and go in for surgery without telling anyone. The chain of command there is shockingly compromised in those kind of situations. They'd be looking at this and thinking, well, now's the time. And that's the concern as we head into this holiday period.
It is a bit of a worry given, you know, as you say, some of the things happening in Israel, some of the things happening with Iran, some of the things happening with Russia and Ukraine. But let's move on to some other matters here. And I want to go back to this whole question about Matt Gaetz and his withdrawal from the Attorney General's nomination. And it's been put to me that this may be a bit of four-dimensional chess. I mean, now Gaetz is out of Congress, and that means that a congressional investigation into him now dies. And now that there's not going to be a confirmation hearing, there's no Department of Justice hearings or anything like that. And now Gaetz gets to move on without any sort of anything that might be out there on him actually coming out to light in an official manner. What do you make of this? And does this leave, though, this seat, the first congressional district in Florida, vulnerable to a challenge from the Democrats?
It does, but look at this electoral result. I don't think that would do them any benefit. And it was risky, though, nonetheless. We are looking at a very narrow margin shaping up in the House of Representatives. So the idea that there's some strategy behind it, it's not without risk. But I think what it does also show is that Donald Trump has a much more disciplined team around him that knows Washington, D.C. When we compare Donald Trump in 2016, when he was such a surprised newcomer that no one wanted to attach themselves to him, and there was kind of this chaotic scramble for people to staff his administration, that hasn't happened this time around. People have been vying for these jobs for the last 4 years. And he has people who know DC. So there's a few bits of strategy to this, that they knew that he was going to step down. Now that they're likely not going to have to release this report into whether he did have sex with a 17-year-old girl as per the allegations. I do want to say still allegations. But what we see is this has kind of neutralized it. And also when you're looking at the broader context of him trying to get a number of people confirmed, even with Republican control in the Senate, he has to deal with Mitch McConnell, Chuck Grassley, a lot of senior Republicans who aren't going to run again. They don't need Donald Trump in an election. So they're happy to throw their weight around, and that's what they're doing now. So it seems like Donald Trump kind of threw this out there knowing it would implode. Well, he gets some of his picks that he really wants down the side.
Yeah, I think it goes back to sort of the clay pigeon theory that, he's up there to be the sort of the target for everybody else and get everybody else through. But what do you think, though, the next target, the next cab off the rank for the haters, I guess you'd say, would be Pete Hegseth at defense. There's some talk of some historic sexual assault claim. I don't know too many of the details of it, but it just seems to have conveniently bubbled up right now. Are they going to try and pull a Kavanaugh on this guy?
Oh, absolutely. I think the hearings are going to be really, really messy. They're going to be really unpleasant, and that doesn't mean that he's not going to win at the end of the day. And even, yes, Hegseth would have seen like a much more extreme nomination if not for Gaetz coming out of the gate. So what I think that strategy is going to do is kind of put him into the more middle ground. But I think Republicans are ready to fight on Hegseth more than other portfolios, because their argument is we don't want to hear anything from the Democrats about defense when they oversaw the withdrawal from Afghanistan. They're done on that front. We are going to reshape this. And it's a big push for Republicans on Capitol Hill. They care about national security. They care about reshaping the military. They want to get a lot of these DEI programs out of the military, and it's a really popular issue among the Republican base. So I think they're ready for that fight, but it will be a fight.
And finally, more broadly, Annelise, one of the things that we heard so much about from the left, and one of their campaign points, was this idea that there was the Heritage Foundation's Project 2035, which was going to be this kind of Handmaid's Tale dystopia that was going to guide the aims of the transition. But I don't know that we've seen a huge amount of this, and there may be some other think tanks that are having some more influence with what's actually going on and what this administration is going to look like. Can you tell us a bit more about that? Shed some light on this.
Look, I've been really following this closely because it was just such a rallying cry for the Democrats to say, look at Project 2025, all these awful things that they're going to do when they come in. And first of all, if you read the document, there was some wacky things in there, absolutely. They had two separate trade chapters that countered each other. Like, it was not a definitive plan, but it was a huge own goal. But why it's important now is when we're looking at all these nominations, the Heritage Foundation basically blacklisted themselves by doing that and assuming to speak for Donald Trump when he at the time said they don't speak for me. And we're seeing that come to fruition with some of these appointments that are coming through. Linda McMahon, the new Secretary for Veterans Affairs, the new ambassador to NATO, they're not coming from the Heritage Foundation or with the blessing of the Heritage Foundation. They're coming through the America First Policy Institute. And that's where a lot of the really influential Trump people parked themselves after the last administration. And so this is where the real influence has been coming from for some time. So it's really niche DC stuff, but I think it's worth revisiting because it was such a big topic in this presidential election. Oh, Project 2025 is going to end the world. We need to remember that that was not Donald Trump's plan. He did not write it himself. There's some hints of what he might do, some suggestions he might pick up. But at the end of the day, it was marketing for another campaign.
Absolutely right. And Annelise Nielsen, I think anybody who knows Donald Trump and that Washington insider stuff, thinking him and the Heritage Foundation going together is a bit amusing. Annelise Nielsen, thank you so much for your time, as always.